One morning, a silence hung over the air with an eerie weight, as if pressing down on the earth itself. Roxy, a 7-year-old Doberman pinscher, rose from her favorite resting spot under an ancient live oak tree at the Sierra Wildlife Sanctuary in California. Her sleek black and tan coat gleamed in the filtered sunlight, but her muzzle, dusted with the gray of wisdom and experience, twitched nervously. Once a proud champion with a pedigree of excellence, Roxy had lived a full, deep life, possessing a maternal instinct that seemed to defy the laws of nature. Something was wrong. Her instincts, honed sharp by years of survival and guardianship, were screaming a warning. It was something her human companions had not yet noticed. A faint scent drifting on the breeze carried the harbinger of danger. Dry timber, earth baking in excessive heat, and the distinct, metallic tang that predicts a disaster. Roxy's olfactory senses processed a complex symphony of odors, and each note added urgency to her growing anxiety. Her restlessness first appeared subtly. She paced slowly around her familiar territory, her intelligent brown eyes scanning the horizon with unusual intensity. Her docked tail, usually held high in confidence or wiggling with satisfaction, was now clamped low, twitching with nervous energy. A low, guttural growl escaped her throat. It was not the playful sound of her youth, but the anxious rumble of a mother sensing a threat to her family. The 3 bears she had raised since they were orphaned cubs noticed this immediately. Titan, the largest of the 3, raised his massive head. He possessed over 300 pounds of muscle and glossy black fur, and was currently foraging near the creek. His dark eyes, specific to his species yet incredibly expressive, followed Roxy's anxious movements with growing concern. Hawk, slightly smaller but majestic in stature, paused his investigation of a rotting log and walked heavily toward his matriarch. Scout, named for the white patch on his chest, rose from his relaxed posture in the afternoon shade to join his brothers, surrounding Roxy in a protective formation. On this day, their surreal family bond was forged in tragedy and strengthened by the years spent together. When Roxy first met the 3 cubs as orphans, a fundamental shift occurred in her world. Her maternal instincts, never spent on puppies of her own, overflowed with phenomenal strength, transforming her from a guardian dog into something unprecedented, a wild bear mother. Now surrounded by her fully grown cubs, Roxy's anxiety was transmitted through the mysterious channels that connected this unique family. The bears moved closer, forming a circle with their massive bodies to protect their small mother. Their senses, forged in the wild but guided by Roxy's superior instincts, began to detect subtle anomalies in the environment. Titan's nose twitched as he picked up the scent that had first unsettled Roxy. It was faint, but unmistakable to those who knew how to read the warnings of the forest. Hawk let out a low rumble, a sound of unease resonating from his massive chest rather than a growl of aggression. Scout shifted from foot to foot, shaking his head as he searched for the source of the confusion. The human staff at the Sierra Wildlife Sanctuary were completely unaware of the events unfolding among their most famous residents. Dr. Elena Foster continued her morning rounds, checking on recovering wildlife at the rehabilitation center. Mike Reynolds was updating the feeding schedules and environmental enrichment activities for the permanent residents. The sanctuary director, Caleb Stone, was reviewing budget reports in his office, welcoming the cool morning breeze through his window. The calm routine was not broken until what Roxy had felt hours ago was finally recorded by sophisticated fire detection systems. An electronic siren sliced through the morning air, instantly throwing everyone into a state of high alert. Minutes later, Caleb's radio crackled with an emergency transmission from the regional fire agency. Sierra Wildlife Sanctuary, this is Cal Fire Command Center. We have confirmed multiple wildfires breaking out on the western ridge of your facility. Current wind and drought conditions are driving extreme fire behavior. Initiate immediate evacuation protocols. Caleb felt his stomach tighten as he processed the information. The sanctuary housed over 200 species of animals in various stages of recovery or permanent care. Moving a diverse population ranging from small birds to large predators was a logistical nightmare even in the best of circumstances. With a wildfire bearing down, it became a race against time where every decision could mean the difference between life and death. Emergency protocols. practiced many times but never executed in a real crisis, began to move with mechanical precision. Staff and volunteers who were going about their daily morning routines were suddenly thrust into roles they were trained for but hoped never to need. Radio communications buzzed with constant updates from teams coordinating the complex task of animal evacuation. Dr. Foster took charge of medical evaluations, quickly categorizing which animals could be moved safely and which required special handling. An owl recovering from a broken wing needed a custom transport crate. A family of foxes recovering from mange required an isolation unit to avoid stress-induced complications. Each animal presented a unique challenge that had to be solved in minutes rather than the hours of careful planning usually required. Mike coordinated the transport logistics. His years of experience with animal behavior were invaluable in organizing the fleet of trucks, trailers, and specialized transport containers. The sanctuary's eastern sector, blessed with natural fire breaks and abundant water sources, was designated to serve as the temporary safety zone. However, getting there required multiple trips along increasingly treacherous roads. As news of the emergency spread to the local community, volunteers began to arrive one after another. Retired veterinarians, former zoo staff, college students studying wildlife biology, and ordinary citizens sympathetic to the sanctuary's mission gathered, building an impressive cooperative effort. Their diverse skills and unified purpose created a rescue operation that would have been impossible without their generous contribution of time and expertise. As the evacuation began in earnest, Roxy and her 3 bear companions were swept up in the controlled chaos. Despite their massive size and wild origins, the bears had lived at the sanctuary long enough to recognize humans as allies rather than threats. They were guided into transport vehicles with minimal resistance, though the constant concern for Roxy's emotional state was evident to anyone who knew their story. The convoy of trucks stretched along the access road like a modern-day Noah's Ark, carrying precious cargo toward safety. Roxy rode in the lead SUV with Caleb, pressing her silver-dusted snout against the window to maintain visual contact with the trailer carrying her 3 adopted sons. Her anxiety had not softened at all, rather, the organized evacuation seemed to amplify her sense of a danger lurking outside her current perception. The landscape flowing past the window told the story of a summer that had pushed the natural world to its limit. Months of below-average rainfall had left vegetation dry and brittle. Riverbeds that should have been full of clear mountain water were merely sporadic puddles connected by flows of mud. The forest, usually a vibrant green canopy, showed signs of stress from long-term drought. These conditions created a powder keg of unprecedented scale. Years of forest management policies prioritizing fire suppression had clogged the mountains with an accumulation of deadwood and dry brush. When the inevitable fire was finally sparked by lightning, human carelessness, or equipment failure, the flames spread with devastating momentum, overwhelming conventional firefighting methods. Updates from the fire crews painted an increasingly dark picture. Small fires had merged to form a massive blaze covering thousands of acres. Wind speeds were increasing rather than decreasing, driving the flames forward at a speed that tested the ability of even the most experienced firefighters to establish containment lines. When the evacuation convoy had covered about half the distance to the safety zone, Roxy's behavior changed dramatically. Her restless anxieties suddenly spiked, turning into focused alertness as she pressed her nose against the window with urgent intensity. Her breathing quickened, and she began a sharp, low whine, a sound her human companions had learned to respect as a sign of her uncanny intuition. Caleb looked at the dog with growing concern. "What is it, Roxy? What do you sense out there?" Roxy's response was a bark. This was not the ordinary bark of a pet seeking attention, but the sharp, urgent sound of an animal trying to convey critical information. She moved to the rear window of the vehicle, fixing her eyes on something as if it had completely captured her attention. Following her gaze, Caleb spotted a narrow canyon cutting through the rocky terrain about 100 yards off the road. It was a geological feature dotting the mountain landscape. A deep fissure created by thousands of years of water erosion, now partially hidden by brush and fallen rocks. Under normal circumstances, it would not have been worth the evacuation convoy's special attention. But Roxy's instincts insisted otherwise. Her barking increased in volume and urgency. and she began scratching at the window, trying to reach whatever had caught her attention. The trailer carrying Titan, Hawk, and Scout pulled up alongside their vehicle, and through the metal grating, the three bears were showing similar agitation. Caleb made a decision that would prove decisive for the day's events. He radioed for the convoy to halt and assembled a small investigation team to check the canyon that had so strongly gripped the animals' attention. Dr. Foster and 2 volunteers joined Caleb as they exited their vehicles and approached the rocky depression. What they discovered would turn a routine evacuation into a legendary rescue mission, testing all the skills, resources, and courage of the protection team. The depth of the gorge was not apparent until they reached the rim. There, the ground dropped away into shadows that seemed to swallow the afternoon light. At a depth of 50 feet, a natural cave had been carved into the canyon wall by centuries of water flow. It now served as a prison for its current inhabitants. 3 families of wild American black bears were huddled in the depths of the canyon. As Caleb and his team looked down, the situation became clear. Each family consisted of a mother and 2 cubs, the adults easily recognizable by their protective posture shielding their young. The bears appeared to have fled into what they thought was a safe shelter, only to realize they were trapped when a recent rockslide blocked the main exit. The scene below painted a picture of growing despair. Massive boulders, some the size of cars, had rolled from the unstable canyon walls, forming an insurmountable barrier across the natural passage the bears would have used to escape. The trapped animals moved restlessly among the rocks, the mother's agitation evident in their constant growls and the way they positioned themselves between their cubs and the perceived threat. But the physical obstacle was only part of their predicament. Thick black smoke, carried by the shifting winds that signaled the approaching wildfire, began to flow into the canyon. The acrid smell of burning vegetation filled the hollow, and through the haze, the orange glow of flames could be seen among the trees on the canyon's western rim. The crackling sound of burning timber grew louder by the minute, indicating the fire would reach their position within an hour. Dr. Foster, with the clinical detachment of one of the region's most respected wildlife veterinarians, quickly assessed the situation. The mothers are showing typical stress behaviors, she reported to Caleb over the radio. They view this as a threat to their territory and will be extremely aggressive toward any rescue attempt. Standard protocols for handling wild bears will not be effective in this confined space. The logistics of the rescue presented almost insurmountable challenges. The canyon's narrow geometry made it impossible to position heavy machinery for a direct lift. Tranquilizers, the standard method for safely handling dangerous wild animals, would not be effective at the necessary distance and angle, even if they could sedate the adults. Moving a 300-pound unconscious animal up 50 feet of rocky terrain required specialized equipment they did not have time to rig. Caleb coordinated with the Fire Command Center, hoping for additional resources or a temporary reprieve from the fire. But the response was not encouraging. All available firefighting resources were deployed on containment efforts elsewhere, and wind models showed no sign of the fire diverting from their location. They were on their own, and time was being calculated in minutes, not hours. In this seemingly impossible situation, Roxy displayed the intelligence and empathy that had made her a legend among the sanctuary staff. Released from the transport vehicle to allow her to approach the trapped bears, she moved to the edge of the canyon with clear determination. Her behavior shifted from her previous restless movements to an intentional focus that commanded everyone's attention. Standing on the rim of the canyon, Roxy began to make sounds in a way no one had ever witnessed. Her vocalizations were not typical dog barks or random noise, but something far more advanced. Her calls combined elements of natural canine communication, seamlessly blending with the growls, affectionate whines, and grunts of complaint she had learned over the years raising Titan, Hawk, and Scout. The result was a unique language, an interspecies communication system developed naturally through her intimate bond with her adopted bear sons. Roxy's words conveyed emotional content that transcended species barriers, delivering concepts of safety, compassion, and maternal understanding to the trapped mothers below. The reaction from the bottom was immediate and remarkable. The wild mothers, who had been reacting to the human presence with aggressive postures and threats, gradually quieted their growling. Their body language shifted subtly but significantly from defensive tension to something approaching curiosity. They continued to guard their cubs, but their attention was now focused on the sleek, black and tan Doberman standing on the canyon rim, and they no longer viewed the human rescuers as a threat. Titan, Hawk, and Scout were released from their trailer and immediately joined their mother's side. Their massive forms radiated a majestic presence, but their behavior mirrored Roxy's: intentional, communicative, and non-aggressive. The three bears began to make their own sounds, a mix of their wild origins and the unique dialect learned within their unusual family structure. What happened next was unprecedented in the records of wildlife behavior observation. The bears above and the bears below engaged in what could only be described as a conversation. A complex exchange of vocal signals and physical actions conveyed meaning between the groups. The wild mothers began to respond with their own calls, and the cubs emerged from behind their mothers' protective bodies to look up at the unusual gathering above. Caleb watched in awe as this interspecies dialogue continued. "I've never seen anything like this," he whispered to Dr. Foster. "It's like they're actually talking." Dr. Foster nodded, her scientist's brain struggling to classify what she was witnessing. "Roxy has created something entirely new," she replied. "Living so closely with bears for so many years has given her insight into their communication patterns that no human researcher has ever reached. She isn't just mimicking sounds, she is actually conveying complex concepts. This probability of a basic communication link provides the foundation for what will be one of the boldest and most successful wildlife rescues in conservation history." With the wild bears no longer viewing the humans as an immediate threat, the rescue team approached the canyon rim and began assessing the physical challenge of extracting the trapped families. The pile of rocks blocking the bears' escape consisted of several massive boulders that had fallen into a configuration completely sealing the natural passage. Moving these obstacles required careful coordination and considerable force to prevent further rockslides. The narrow workspace at the bottom of the gorge meant there was little room for lowered equipment or personnel to maneuver. Caleb organized the team with military precision, assigning specific roles based on each person's expertise and physical strength. Dr. Foster monitored the bears' stress levels and provided medical intervention if necessary. Mike coordinated the equipment and materials carried by the volunteers, whose numbers continued to grow despite the approaching fire. The strongest members of the team would move the rock obstacles directly. And the most critical role belonged to Roxy and her 3 adopted sons. While the human team tackled the physical aspects of the rescue, the unusual dog and bear family maintained the communication bridge that kept the wild bears calm and cooperative. Roxy positioned herself where the trapped mother bears could see her clearly, continuing her remarkable vocalizations while Titan, Hawk, and Scout added their own reassuring sounds to the conversation. The rescue operation began with careful preparation and safety protocols, but the encroaching fire forced everyone to work with desperate urgency. Ropes and pulleys were set up to provide mechanical advantage for moving the heavy rocks. Smaller rocks were removed by hand, and team members formed a human chain to lift debris out of the canyon. Every few minutes, someone checked the fire's progress, reporting that the orange glow was brightening and the smoke thickening. Roxy never wavered in her role as self-appointed lead communicator. Despite the physical stress of her age and the situation, she maintained her position at the canyon's edge, her voice resonating with ceaseless calls, her determination undiminished. As the fire grew closer, the temperature rose, and her sleek coat became slick with sweat, but she refused the handlers' attempts to move her to a safer distance. Her 3 bear sons showed similar dedication, working as a tight-knit unit that demonstrated the depth of their unusual family bond. When the team needed help moving a particularly large boulder, Titan, despite his massive bulk, descended into the canyon with surprising agility. His raw power combined with the mechanical advantage provided by the human team was enough to shift a rock that human strength alone could not budge. Hawk and Scout took turns joining their brother in the physical labor, their natural climbing abilities allowing them to navigate the rocky terrain with confidence. The sight of huge bears working in cooperation with humans on a rescue effort was a powerful testament to the bonds that form between species when the situation demands cooperation. Influenced by Roxy's continuous communication and the obvious good intentions of the rescue team, The wild mothers began to actively contribute to the effort. They helped by guiding their cubs to the safest areas at the bottom of the canyon and pushing smaller rocks out of the work area. Their cooperation made an impossible rescue seemingly possible, though still extremely dangerous. As the evacuation progressed, a tragedy common to critical situations struck. 2 of the 3 wild mothers, weakened by long-term stress and smoke exposure, began to show signs of severe debilitation. Despite Dr. Foster's immediate veterinary intervention, their condition deteriorated rapidly. The combination of panic, physical exhaustion, and smoke inhalation was simply too much for their already stressed systems. The loss of the 2 mothers left 4 cubs orphaned in an already traumatic situation. It was in this moment of tragedy and triumph that Roxy's greatest act of motherhood occurred. As the final rocks were moved and the escape route fully opened, the surviving wild bear family and the 4 orphaned cubs began their ascent to freedom. The surviving adult mother and her 2 cubs, driven by the instinct to flee approaching danger, moved quickly toward safety. However, 2 of the orphaned cubs, the smallest and most vulnerable, seemed unable to comprehend their freedom. They huddled where their mothers had fallen, too young and traumatized to understand that survival now depended on their own actions. Their pitiful cries echoed from the canyon, sounds of loss and confusion that struck the hearts of everyone on the rescue team. Without hesitation, Roxy descended into the canyon. Her aging joints protested the difficult climb, and her breathing was heavy from smoke and exertion. But her maternal instinct overrode all physical limits. She approached the cubs with the same gentle confidence she had shown when she first met Titan, Hawk, and Scout. The cubs recognized in her the same maternal energy their own mothers had provided and responded to her presence with desperate gratitude. They pressed themselves against her compact, muscular body, seeking the comfort and safety that only a mother can give. Roxy accepted them completely and immediately, proving that her capacity for love remained as infinite as ever. Titan and Hawk joined their little mother and new siblings, forming a protective circle around the traumatized cubs. The sight of 3 massive bears gently surrounding the tiny cubs while a Doberman mother provided emotional support created one of the most moving scenes in the history of the sanctuary. The evacuation from the canyon became a lesson in interspecies cooperation and family bonds that transcended biological boundaries. Titan used his size and strength to help the tiny cubs overcome the difficult ascent, while Hawk and Scout surrounded the group to provide safety and encouragement. Roxy, despite her own physical challenges, never left the cubs' side, constantly reassuring them through her unique vocalizations and gentle physical contact. As the extended family reached the surface and began moving toward the waiting transport vehicles, the looming wildfire swallowed the western rim of the canyon. Flames danced among the trees where they had been working just minutes before, and the heat became almost unbearable. The timing of their escape could not have been closer. Another few minutes, and rescue would have been impossible. The convoy resumed its journey to the safety zone, carrying its precious cargo, now increased by 2. Roxy sat in the transporter with her new cubs, her body language showing exhaustion but also deep satisfaction. Titan, Hawk, and Scout maintained protective positions around their new siblings, displaying care behaviors learned from their adoptive mother. This image of an unusual family, a Doberman pinscher acting as mother to 5 black bears ranging from tiny cubs to fully grown giants, created a powerful symbol of hope and resilience. Their story spread beyond the boundaries of the Sierra Wildlife Sanctuary, inspiring people around the world as proof that love, courage, and compassion can overcome the most trying circumstances. When the convoy finally arrived at the safety zone and began the process of setting up temporary facilities for the evacuated animals, Roxy settled down surrounded by her extended family. Her 2 newest members huddled close to her side, finding the safety they needed to recover from their traumatic experience in her presence. The giant bears stood guard in a reflex to protect their beloved mother and vulnerable siblings, their massive bodies forming a safe fortress. The wildfire raged for several more days, burning thousands of acres of forest until the coordinated efforts of fire teams from across the region finally brought it under control. When sanctuary staff eventually returned to assess the damage, the canyon where the bears had been trapped was completely charred, and the surrounding forest reduced to the skeletal remains of trees that had once stood proud. The rescue had not only saved the lives of 7 bears and proven the remarkable intelligence and compassion of an unusual dog, but it also revealed new possibilities for interspecies understanding and communication. Roxy's unique language became the subject of scientific study, offering insights into animal intelligence and interspecies relationships that challenged conventional notions about the boundaries of different forms of consciousness. But for Caleb and his staff, the true significance of that day lay not in scientific implications, but in the testament to the power of family bonds that transcend species boundaries. Watching Roxy teach her 3 adult sons how to care for their new siblings, showing them how to offer warmth, comfort, and protection to the orphaned cubs, served as a daily reminder that love and compassion are a universal language that bridges all divides. The extended family settled into their new life with remarkable adaptability. The old facility was rebuilt with enhanced fire protection features, and special accommodations were created for the unusual family structure born of the crisis. Roxy tackled her expanded responsibilities with the same dedication and wisdom that had made her a legend among those who knew her as the mother of 5 bears, from toddlers to fully grown adults. As the seasons changed and the forest began its slow process of recovery from the scars of the fire, the sight of Roxy walking the sanctuary trails with her 5 bear children became a symbol of rebirth and hope. Their story served as a reminder that even in the face of natural disasters and seemingly insurmountable challenges, the power of family bonds and love can create miracles beyond human imagination. The golden light of dusk often illuminated them as they gathered in their favorite clearing. An aging Doberman with a silver-dusted muzzle, surrounded by 5 black bears of varying sizes, bound together by ties stronger than blood and deeper than species. Their peaceful companionship spoke a fundamental truth about the remarkable capacity of the heart to embrace family, love, and those in need of protection and care. Ultimately, Roxy's legacy would extend far beyond her lifetime, influencing wildlife conservation practices and inspiring countless stories about the possibilities that emerge when love recognizes no boundaries. Her unique family would continue to thrive, a living testament that in a world often divided by differences, the universal language of motherhood can build bonds that surmount every barrier, bringing out the best in all who witness its power.